Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Longshot the Dice Game, which is a 1 to 8 player roll and write betting game that takes around 25 minutes to play on average. But before I get into my review, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer in the UK. And if you use my personal link in the show notes, you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get into the review. Okay, so a game of Longshot is going to look somewhat like this when it's set up, where you have this main board in the center of the table, which is essentially a racetrack. And on that racetrack, you have all the different wooden tokens representing a different horse. You've got horses numbered from 1 to 8 here, and each of those horses has a corresponding card to go with it. As you can see here, the number 1 horse is called Chain Reaction. This is going to be the cost to buy that horse, to own it personally. These are the odds here that you're going to get from betting on that horse. Each horse is also going to have a unique ability that you can get when you acquire that horse, and the kind of strip along the bottom here means that when this horse moves, then the additional horses that have got these X ticked off next to their number are also going to move. So piggybacking is quite a big part of this game. And as you can see, all these different horses have different odds and have a different ability associated to them. Each player is also going to start with a personal little player sheet here, and this is going to show all the different actions you've taken throughout the game and going to monitor how much money you're getting and also how much money you have. So at the start of the game, you're also going to have a kind of randomized little thing here which shows your starting position on your player sheet. So you can see here that I've ticked off everything matching with this card so that everybody kind of starts off at a different position. So you can see here I automatically start with a 2-bet on the number 1 horse and a 4-bet on the number 6 horse. So each turn in this game is pretty quick and simple to resolve, where you're going to roll the pair of dice here, and one is a D8, all of which has a face associated to a different horse, and the other one is a D3. So at the moment you can see that the 6 horse is moving 2 spaces. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the 6 horse and move it 2 spaces along the track here, and you're also going to have a look at the 6 horse and have a look at all the other horses piggybacking off that one. So you can also see that the number 2 horse and the number 3 horse are moving, and when that happens, they are only going to move 1 space. So once the dice have been rolled and the horses have been moved, each player is going to have the ability to tick something off their personal player sheet based on the horse number that has been rolled. So you can see here, again, we rolled the 6, so we have the option to tick out off a number of different things. So the first of which is this little concessions bit here, where you are trying to build rows and columns of numbers. So I would have the option to tick off a 6 if I wanted to. I don't have a free hand, so I won't be able to do that. But as soon as you get a row or column, then you can take one of these bonuses, which can be taking $6 and adding it to your betting money. It can be moving 2 horses back 2 spaces. It can be having a free bet on a horse. It can be moving 2 horses forward 2 spaces, 1 horse back 3 spaces, or 1 horse forward 3 spaces, another free bet. And you've got the helmet and the jersey action, which I'll talk about shortly. And you have the option to buy a horse for free. The helmet action lets you tick off the helmet spot on that corresponding number. So again, the 6 helmet will be ticked off. And then what that means is that when horses get past this non-bet line here, which would mean that you normally would not be able to put in any more bets, you can kind of break that rule and give yourself a better chance to pick the winning horse. By ticking off a jersey, you are going to have a look at the corresponding card, and you're going to pick any of the available horses and you're going to cross off that number. And now, of course, what that means is that when that number is rolled, again, the 6 horse, then any horse that's got a tick off here is also going to move. So if you've got a lot of stock invested in a specific horse, then you might want to get as many of that number ticked off on all the different horses. So no matter what horse is rolled, your horse is also going to move. And you can also bet on a horse by spending up to $3. Again, you start with 12, and whatever you bet, you're going to take off this number and add on to your betting slip. And what that means is if at the end of the game, your horse comes in the top 3 positions, finishing first, second, or third, then you're going to multiply your bet by the odds of that horse. So again, if the game ended like this and say the blue 6 won, it'll be 4 multiplied by 7, because again, that 7 corresponds to the first spot. Therefore, I would get $28 for doing so. And the final option is to buy one of the horses, where you're going to spend an amount of money depending on the value of that horse. So again, these earlier ones are worth a bit more money because they start with crosses off a lot of the other cards, meaning that they're more likely to move. And then you're going to take that card in front of you. And for the rest of the game, you are going to have an ability. So you can see this one here says, when you complete a vertical column, mark any other number off. So this is a nice way to get more concessions. And all these horses have different abilities, which we'll touch on a bit later. Additionally, if a horse you own finishes in one of the top 3 spaces, then you're going to get a big chunk of money, either $35, $25, or $15. You also have 3 options to change a number to what you want it to be by ticking off one of these wildcard tokens. And that means that you can convert, say, the 6 into a 1 or a 2, or whatever you want it to be, just to get yourself out of a corner if you don't have a good option to make. So that is essentially how the game is going to play out. You're going to roll those dice, move the horses, and tick something off your sheet until 3 of the horses have passed the finish line, and then you're going to calculate final scoring based on if any horses you're owning finish in the top 3, any matching pair of helmet and jersey are going to get you $5. Any bets you have, of course, multiplying your bet by the position they finished in. And if your horse that you bet on even crosses this non-bet line, then you at least get your money back. You're also going to get points left on any money you have left in your kitty. And then, of course, at the end of the game, the person with the most money will be the winner. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Longshot, the dice game. So first off, I really want to stress how much the thrill of the race shines through here. So you're going to have runaway horses, you're going to have tight finishes, you're going to have non-starters at times, and that is a lot of fun. But despite that pure kind of random luck, I suppose, of rolling the dice, there is a good degree of controlled chaos here, because there are mitigation tools that you can utilize, ticking off the horse that you want to win on other sheets, so they're always getting a steady pace and always contributing to the movement. You can even push horses back if you've got no investment on them, or move your horses forward based on the concessions you do. So yeah, despite it being subject to a lot of dice rolls, there is some mitigation and some control that you can influence the game on based on things you invest in on your personal player sheet. I also feel like the game does a great job of offering you plenty of choices to make, and all of which are inviting, but not overwhelming you with decisions. It's not an ultra confusing sheet or anything like that, but again, you want to dip your toes into everything because the concessions are great, but they require a bit of an investment to do so, but they are going to pay off when you get those rows and columns, or even get a row and a column in one instance by doing both at once. Are you going to get a big cash injection to give you more options to bet on? Are you going to have a free bet and hopefully pick a winning horse? Are you going to buy a winning horse? Are you going to get a free jersey or a helmet action, or even start manipulating the position on the board because you have so much invested in a particular horse? So again, there's really good decisions here. However, it's not overwhelmingly complex, and it kind of fits that weird bracket or niche of being like a party plus game. I don't think brand new gamers are going to understand everything at once, but I think that next step, everything's going to click with you. And if you're experienced gamers, there's going to be a good balance of being a light, breezy, fun, raucous experience, but still having some pretty interesting decisions to make. There's also some pretty interesting strategic decisions you have to make here. Are you going to all in on a specific horse? Are you going to just try and buy that horse and invest as much of your funds in that horse winning, and maybe spend your whole game trying to push that horse forward or push its rival horses backwards? But at the same time, your opponents might be trying to compete with that because they've invested in other horses as well. And you've also got to be quite careful of how to spread your odds a bit, because again, if you go completely all in on one horse, then your opponents are probably going to make a pretty conscious effort to do everything they can to prevent that horse from winning. I think that one of my favourite mechanisms in the game is to tick off the other horses on each of these horse cards. That's such a cool thing, because even if you have a horse with pretty poor odds at the start of the game because they're not going to get pulled along by any other horses, then you can slowly start turning the tide by ticking it off on all the other horses, meaning that no matter what moves, your horse is also going to move. And the worst horses here that start in a worse position are going to be worth a hell of a lot better odds. And this betting system in itself is so simple, but it works wonderfully well. by what you're betting is multiplied by the odds of that horse. If you manage to pull off a great result by having a 7 or 8 horse win, then your multipliers are going to be absolutely massive. I also love the abilities that these horses grant you when you own them. We already talked about number 1 there, but let's talk about some of the others. So this number 2 horse here says that whenever you roll a number 2, you're going to get an extra $2 for you to bet with or to add to your final score. You've got the scattershot one here that says instead, when you mark a concession, you can actually take a higher value or a lower value to make sure that you have that freedom to get the rows and columns you want. This one here lets you bet for free on horses that you've not bet on yet. A couple more let's talk about. This one says when you complete a horizontal row, you can move any horse -1. And let's just talk about this one. It says when you buy this horse, you can mark any one concession, hat or jersey. And there's a whole ton of these cards here because there's actually multiple setups you can do. So yeah, really nice variation there to make the game feel different each time you play. So we talked about a lot of positives there. Let's talk about a couple of minor issues I have with the game. And it's not really a game problem, it's more of an admin housekeeping problem. And that is when you are playing this game at the higher player counts, it can become a bit frantic and a bit disorderly because with a lot of these abilities, or not a lot of them, but with a couple of them, you need to resolve them in player order. So that can bring the game to a bit of a halt. So let's just say a number of people wanted to buy a horse on a certain turn, then that's going to have to be activated from the first player onwards. So again, resolving things in order does bring this game to a little bit of a halt where a lot of roll and write games, no matter what you roll, you can resolve it simultaneously, which keeps the game ticking along. But I will say this is a big part of the game, and I do feel like the benefits of the different actions you take and how they are resolved in player order does add to the game more than take away from it. But it is something you need to take control of and maybe have a player running the game just to make sure that you are resolving things in the right order to make sure that everything is being resolved fairly. Additionally, I do feel like sometimes you can get a little bit too much done in terms of the concessions because you do end up ticking quite a lot of these off. You get a lot of rows and columns completed and you get a hell of a bonus from doing so. So I would have liked this to be a little bit harder to achieve because these bonuses are so strong. Particularly ones such as buying the horse for free. You're going to find everybody's going to do that really. But yeah, I would have liked that to be a little bit tighter. Now sometimes that isn't the case because you have a quickly resolved race and you're just not going to have the capacity to tick many things off. But as you have a more tense race and things are being back and forth, then there's going to be more turns, meaning that there's going to be more concessions ticked off. I think that the time investment for this game is absolutely fantastic. This is a hell of an experience to be played in 25 minutes to half an hour. You're going to go through a whole range of emotions, and again, that pure thrill of the race does shine through beautifully in that time. It feels snappy as you'd want a race to be, and it doesn't get dragged out or anything like that. So yeah, I cannot complain at all in relation to the game length. There's also a strong degree of interaction here because inevitably you are going to start bidding on different horses than your opponents do, and you're all going to be rooting for different horses, meaning that you're going to push other horses back and push yours forward. Maybe you've got a bit of a partnership with another player and you both have a lot invested in the same horse, so you're both pushing that one along. So yeah, this is a really dynamic game that's going to just encourage that kind of cheering your horse on and discouraging other horses, and it's just a very fun and kind of a boisterous experience. The game also scales really well. I've played this happily as low as 3 players, but I would play with 2, no issue. But I do think it starts to peak a bit more at that kind of 3, 4, 5 player mark. And when you get a bit more than that, don't get me wrong, it works perfectly fine. But as I mentioned earlier, it does start to bleed in a bit more chaos, and keeping it in order becomes a bit more problematic. But generally, I think the game scales very well considering it does cater from 1 all the way up to 8 players. And I will say I have not played the solo mode, so I can't testify to how good that mode is or not. I think the production for the game is generally good. The player sheets in particular are very well laid out, nice and clear to look at, and the horse pieces are great as well because I actually appreciate that they are quite chunky pieces where you can clearly see the number on them, because some other racing games out there are quite hard to identify which pieces are which. The only issue I have with the game is the board itself. It's not the highest quality and it does kind of bow and not lie flat on the table. Maybe that's just the version I have or the board I have, but other than that, I'm very happy with it. The cards are good and you can, write on them and stuff. You get a chunk of pens with the game as well, a bunch of these sheets, and of course all the different horses as well that you can choose to introduce into the game. So yeah, very happy with the production, and it's nice that it fits in a small box to keep the space it takes up to a minimum. Okay, so let's get into some final thoughts on Longshot, the dice game. So I actually remember this game being on Kickstarter, and for some reason I chose to pass on it. And I think the reason for that was that at that time I had Camel Up in my collection, and I was pretty fatigued of Camel Up at that time. I thought it was a bit boring, and I was just done with it. And I thought this was going to offer a lot of the same experience of Camel Up. So I thought, oh, why do I need it? I don't really need that in my collection right now. Now, when it started to get distributed out to the backers, it started to generate a bit of buzz and get some good word of mouth. And I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to play this one at a gaming convention. And I am so glad I did, because I instantly fell in love with this game. I thought it was fantastic. I had an absolute blast. I loved how dynamic it was. I loved all the different options you could have on your sheet, and all of them are inviting. I really want to get this helmet because a horse is starting to run away with it. It's going to pass this line any time, and I've got no bets on it yet, so I need to change that ASAP. I also might have money invested in another horse, so I want to tick it off on all the other sheets so that it's always moving. I need to get my bets in. I need to get the concessions in, and juggling all of this and prioritizing what you want to do is huge. So again, I really love how well balanced it is in terms of being accessible, but still having a ton of decisions to be made, and being gamey enough, but not to obstruct the pure thrill of the race. I think the chaotic nature of the game works in its advantage. As I said, you're going to have some horses that just completely run away with it sometimes. You're going to have complete dud horses, and it's just what an absolute blast. And you know what, even if you have a terrible game of this, as in not getting any points or any money, then it only takes 30 minutes, and I still think you're going to have a lot of fun with the game. So I cannot state how much I enjoy this game. I think it's fantastic. It's a nice little succinct box here, very short to play, a great fun game to introduce to other players. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, it can be a little bit chaotic at the higher player counts, but if you take a conscious effort to manage that carefully, then that's not going to be too much of a problem. But this completely blew Camel Up out of the water for me. It's, as far as I'm concerned, Camel Up is dead, and it's all about Longshot, the dice game now. Very, very happy with this one, and it's certainly going to earn my shield of quality. So I understand this has been kind of in and out of stock recently, but hopefully it will start to be more widely available, because I think this one could be an absolute colossal hit, and it deserves to be because it is that much fun.